Hey folks, author MJ Gallagher here and welcome back to Rebirth Revealed, a series presented and funded by KupoCon. This episode covers the details and lore you may have missed from the Under Junon section of Chapter 4, itself titled Dawn of a New Era. Spoilers beyond this part of the game are minimal, but as always, please beware of likely spoilers for the original Final Fantasy VII, its remake, and the compilation in general. So let's hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and dive right in. Having negotiated the perils of the Mithril Mine, the party emerges in the rocky terrain of the Junon region, where they find a line of 7 black-robed figures waiting for them. If I didn't know any better, I'd suspect an external force was using them to guide Cloud. Suddenly, a giant condor swoops down from the mountain and snatches one of the robed men in its talons, flying off into the distance, where the lone peak of an isolated landmass can be seen. As the group begins down the trail towards Junon, Red 13 mentions a story about a great bird that roosts atop an abandoned reactor, situated on an island that cannot be reached. The purpose of this scene, of course, is to establish through visuals and dialogue that the optional Fort Condor segment of the original Final Fantasy VII has been redistributed. I'll speak a lot more in depth about this in a forthcoming video, but Fort Condor's community of anti-Shinra activists has been reimagined as the Crow's Nest, while the battle strategy minigame has had a complete overhaul, as first seen in Remake's DLC episode Intermission, which features Yuffie Kisaragi. The appearance of the actual Condor here is likely a callback to the DLC's ending, in which the colossal creature is shown soaring above the Midgar wastelands, as confirmed in the artwork of Remake's Material Ultimania Plus, and is thus a subtle hint at Yuffie's imminent introduction. And for veteran fans who'd hoped to see the Condor perched on the reactor's crown, the development team didn't disappoint, as it's clearly visible the next morning. As the team approaches Under Junon, Aerith triggers a conversation that informs the player of the difference between the grand city of Junon overhead and the impoverished fishing village that dwells in its shadow. This, of course, as in the old game, creates a parallel to Midgar's slums. Rebirth demonstrates some self-awareness here by calling this section of the main quest Under a Steel Sky. Those familiar with either Remake or Crisis Core may recognise Steel Sky as the term Aerith uses to describe Midgar's upper city, which, as it happens, she finds more comforting than the boundless freedom of the firmament itself. The most memorable character from Under Junon in Final Fantasy VII is Priscilla, a young girl who has befriended the Cove's resident dolphin. Unlike in the demo edition of this chapter, released a week or so prior to Rebirth's launch, Priscilla does not appear immediately after the group are welcomed into the town by Sheriff Rhonda. Instead, the full version of the game waits until after the boss fight to properly introduce her, because she's not the one in danger. While Priscilla's role in the story seems to have been diluted somewhat, there are still a few references around to her previous incarnation. For example, there's an old lady near the entrance to the village that's singing the girl's praises, which may be a callback to the woman who offers her home for the night in the original. The Moore twins, Devon and Darren, who challenge Cloud to a Queen's Blood match, can be found in an elevated cabin whose interior closely resembles Priscilla's in Final Fantasy VII. And while the Shiva materia is not acquired from Priscilla this time around, the Shiva Queen's Blood card can be won from an NPC named Isabel at the bar. On a semi-related note, I'm sure we're all delighted to see the return of Mr. Dolphin. This shouldn't have come as a surprise, however, as he's clearly a favourite among the developers. If you look really closely during the 2015 reveal trailer for the Remake project, you might notice that the girl on the slide is wearing a t-shirt with Tetsuya Nomura's original illustration of Mr. Dolphin. Under Junon may also contain its own Easter egg of another aquatic creature from the Final Fantasy series. There's a painting at the inn that looks suspiciously like the talking purple octopus Ultros, who first appeared in Final Fantasy VI, a game that was directed by Rebirth's producer Yoshinori Kitase. Across Sea Dragon Square is a female planetologist preaching to a small crowd about how Mako is polluting the waters and causing pain to the Great Mother. The use of the phrase here is interesting because several official sources have referred to the planet as Gaia, but the name has never featured in any of the compilation titles or accompanying Ultimanias. In ancient Greek mythology, Gaia is the personified Earth, meaning the Great Mother in this context is a reference to the concept of Mother Earth. It's additionally worth pointing out that the planetologist's garb is reminiscent of the robes worn by many Yevon worshippers in Final Fantasy X, also directed by Yoshinori Kitase. Given the long speculated links between the worlds of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy X, originating from the creator interviews of the Ultimania Omega, this is probably not a coincidence. The comparison is reinforced by similarities between the Folios system in Rebirth and the sphere grid of Final Fantasy X. Furthermore, it's revealed later in Rebirth that Magnata books, the stores in which Folios are upgraded, find their roots in the teachings of planetology. And if you return to Kalm after initially escaping the Shinra military in Chapter 2, there's a planetologist who will make reference to Avalanche's activism in Midgar, as witnessed during Remake. For the avoidance of doubt, Avalanche 2 was founded on the principles of planetology, which is why the preachers sound so much like Barrett. In my opinion, the abundance of new lore regarding the Republic of Junon is one of the most interesting aspects of Rebirth's world building. I spoke a little bit about it in episode 4 of this series, so for now, I'd like to touch specifically on the region's former capital. According to the World Intel panel, this widespread seafaring nation constructed a flotilla of interconnected ships to serve as a floating city. The Republic used Junon as the hub of its expansive trade network, whose influence crossed the Meridian Ocean to the western continent, which is why so many crates with Republic insignia on them can be found as you progress through the game. Junon became a symbol of freedom and prosperity, but during the Republic's war with Shinra, the flotilla was destroyed and the fleet sank to the bottom of the sea. To suppress any potential resistance, the company erected a fortified city of steel on the coast, which resembles a vast battleship, perhaps as a mocking tribute to their enemy. Junon is now powered by the world's only underwater reactor, built amid the watery graveyard of the Republic's capital. This likely ties into the presence of the ghost ship opponents in the undersea tunnel during the original Final Fantasy VII. Fascinatingly, a painting of what the floating city looked like in its heyday can be viewed in the town square, with the elderly gentleman teaching the gathered kids what it was like to live there. There's another lady opposite Magnata Books who remarks that in the days before Mako Energy, the Republic of Junon was capable of generating its own power through coal, oil and wind. As I mentioned early in my Remake video series, this is nothing new to the compilation, because we learned during Advent Children that Barrett, himself from a coal mining town, has been off investigating oil as an alternative energy source to Mako. This is further explained during his chapter in the official novel On the Way to a Smile. As I alluded to earlier in the video, this chapter is where the party finally meets Yuffie. The circumstances of the encounter are very different to before, but it is in the forests of the Junon region that she can first be recruited during the old game. Priscilla calls out to Yuffie while the Terror of the Deep, formerly known as Bottom Swell, prepares to strike, revealing that the girls are acquainted. Rhonda later notes that Yuffie is a guest in Under Junon, which makes sense given its anti-Shinra vibe. There may also be more specific Wutai related reasons though. The centre of the village is Sea Dragon Square, which would be an attractive name for a Wutaian native, whose guardian deity is the Great Water Serpent Leviathan. Leviathan, of course, is a recurring summon in the Final Fantasy series, including Remake. For those with a completed Remake save file on their PlayStation 5, the Leviathan materia is a downloadable extra in Rebirth. As for why Yuffie was in a boat in the first place, it's worth mentioning that the soldier missions of Crisis Core include an assignment for Zack in which he is sent to Fort Condor, because remnants of the Wutai army are reported to be hiding there. Although I'm simply speculating, Yuffie's connection to Fort Condor may have more weight to it than we realise. After defeating the Terror of the Deep, Cloud is asked to help resuscitate Yuffie, which is a callback to giving Priscilla mouth-to-mouth in the original. The young ninja wakes with a start, but quickly recognises Barrett and Tifa as members of the Avalanche Splinter Cell she saw in Midgar during episode intermission. The brief flashback to the DLC depicts Yuffie in her Moogle disguise, which becomes relevant later, but I'll discuss that in the next video. And speaking of outfits, eagle-eyed fans may have spotted that Yuffie's character model has been updated to include a layered armguard, a belt and holster, and a peculiar design on the back of her shorts. This is the Kisaragi emblem of a swallow and crescent moon, as confirmed in Remake's material Ultimania Plus. The same crest can also be found on her shoulder pauldron and one of the blades of her four-pointed shuriken. Just in case any veteran players were feeling a bit overwhelmed by the changes, however, the development team was sure to include Yuffie's old school Naruto run in her scene with Avalanche at Sea Dragon Square. Back at the inn, the proprietor insists the party stays for free as thanks for helping out, which is pretty much what happens in the original Final Fantasy VII. In that game, Cloud hears a mysterious voice in his head before he wakes up the next morning. By contrast, in Rebirth, a strange, youthful voice can be heard drifting from Aerith's room, talking about something being sucked from his head. Aerith says she's experienced the same thing, and the voice blames the Whispers. This is a reference to Chapter 17 of Remake, where Aerith tells the others that she's been losing parts of herself to the Whispers, which, as is clarified by co-director Motomu Toriyama in the material Ultimania Plus, specifically relates to memories of the future that Aerith had access to. The context here may offer a hint towards who she's actually speaking to in this moment. The end sequence itself grants Cloud an opportunity to develop his relationships with the others. Of these, only the interaction with Tifa is mandatory, hence the background music being the version of Ahead on Our Way from Remake. In that game, the track accompanies the scene where Tifa first realises how different Cloud is from the boys she remembers, having just witnessed him prepare to kill Johnny for surrendering information to Shinra. Ahead on Our Way also happens to be the music that plays at many towns in Final Fantasy VII, including Under Junon. Welcoming him into her room, Tifa asks Cloud if he recalls a guy from Nibelheim called Emilio. According to the official novel Traces of Two Pasts, Emilio is one of the three kids who Tifa was close friends with when she was younger. The book also reveals he had romantic feelings towards Tifa, and is the individual responsible for the letter that can be found in her bedroom during the Nibelheim flashback in the original. Even more curiously, there's a young man outside the Sector 5 slums marketplace in Crisis Core Reunion who talks to Zack about sending letters to his sweetheart in Nibelheim. It's strongly implied that this is Emilio. It's also worth pointing out that the purpose of the scene is to have Tifa ask Cloud something about their shared past in Nibelheim, highlighting once again that they both have a degree of apprehension about the other's version of events from 5 years ago. This is also a sneaky twist on the old game, because the mysterious voice in Cloud's head that I mentioned before prompts him to ask Tifa what she was doing back then. And finally, the next morning, Cloud is awoken by Yuffie, who leads the rest of the group into his room. She fully introduces herself here, using similarly rehearsed materia theatrics to those she did with the members of Avalanche HQ during episode intermission. The ninja then divulges that she's been recruited by Rhonda to assassinate President Rufus, and takes her leave through an open window as a familiar soldier calls to them from the square, the Speed Demon himself. Roche is a third-class soldier who features in Chapter 4 of Remake. Interestingly, Yuffie encounters him in episode intermission as an opponent for the Fort Condor minigame, which is probably why the writers kept the two of them apart in this sequence. His inclusion in the DLC may have been a nod to a proposed scenario that was cut from Remake's Chapter 14, where Roche and Cloud were supposed to have a race through the slums, according to the Ultimanias. In hindsight, his remarks after Yuffie defeats him at Fort Condor that they'll next meet on the open road might have foreshadowed the duo's appearance in Rebirth's Junon region. The girl's exit also marks her third swift departure from an interaction with the group since meeting them the previous evening, which could be an allusion to the mechanics of her optional recruitment in the original. After besting Yuffie in battle, the player must answer a series of questions in a particular order, some of which suggest their indifference to her joining the team. If they select the wrong dialogue choice, the ninja will run away and must be tracked down again. Nevertheless, this isn't the last we've seen of Yuffie in Chapter 4. Well guys, that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I invite you to check out all future episodes on KupoCon's channel. If you're interested in the lore side of things, my own books, Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII and Greek myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII, are both available on Amazon. As always, I'd especially like to thank all of KupoCon's Patreon subscribers for your continued support. Without your backing, productions such as this would not be possible. If you're not already a patron, please do consider joining for some incredible KupoCon exclusives. But for now, take care. I'm MJ Gallagher, and I'll speak to you again soon.